What is going on to all my White Lotus fans out there, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elliot, and this is MovieFiles. We are back discussing the White Lotus Season 2, Episode 6, which happens to be titled Abductions, which by definition is the action of taking someone away by force or deception. So was someone taken by force in this episode, or were people deceived? We'll be discussing that and so much more in today's spoiler breakdown review. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way you all can stay up to date with all my daily reviews. You could also give your boy a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. All those links can be found in the description of this very video. Speaking of this video, if you all enjoyed today's review, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up. Make sure you're sharing this review to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. But more importantly, I want to know your thoughts on this 6th episode, because we got one more. Next week's the finale. But before we get to the finale, what do you think about this episode? I'm talking about that photo. Was that Greg, or was Tanya just high off her ass? Ethan's losing his cool, and did Harper and Cameron hook up? We have so much to discuss, and I want to know your thoughts in the comments below. So, hey, Christmas came early for your boy last night because, as I mentioned in our review last week, HBO made it known that they were not going to be giving out episodes 6 and 7. I was cool with that, but as you can see on the screen now, late Saturday evening, I got the email. They sent me the link, watched the episode, and here we are talking about it, which they did double down, by the way. There will not be screenings for episode 7, which is cool because that brings me to my next announcement. I talked about it last week, and I'm going to bring it up again. We're going to have a fun time for the finale. We will be doing 2 live streams come December 11th, so mark your calendar at, let's say, 7:30, maybe 7:45-ish. We'll be going live Central Time to do a watch party. We're going to pregame first, get excited, talk about some predictions, and maybe do a tier list of our favorite characters. And then once it becomes 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time, we're going to watch the episode together as a community and have a good time, find out about who's going to live, who's going to die, all that fun stuff. And then maybe 10-15 minutes after the episode finishes, we're going to go live again that same night to have a live after show. It's going to be such a good time. So again, mark your calendar. Next week, next Sunday, pregame, watch party, and we're going to have an after show for next week's finale. I'm ready for it. But before we get to next week, we got to talk about this week's episode. With all that being said, full spoilers ahead as we open this episode with Albie and Lucia having sex yet again. As Ethan and Harper talk about the relationship, but more importantly, her not believing him, honesty is put to question. And I find it so funny in this moment because I said this a couple weeks ago. Does Ethan even find his wife attractive? But I want to go back to her again, trying to be more sexually active with her husband. And this is not only in this episode. Y'all remember last week, she did the same thing when she was like, well, do you want me to help you finish? She's like, no, I'm good. 2 questions. Is Ethan attracted to his wife? Harper goes on to say that they are way too young to feel this old, and Harper tells him something in this relationship has died, which I find that to be a very interesting choice of words. And this is reinforced in this feeling after Harper says to him, do you even want me? And then we see Ethan's response is, I love you. Not, yes, I want you. You're the most desirable woman in the world. He just says, I love you. It's just so funny seeing them in this moment and going back to episode 1, how I personally felt just seeing these new couples. Like, I definitely have a feeling that the Harper and Ethan relationship has a stronger foundation in the relationship than Cameron and Daphne. But oh boy, has that turned on his head. And not saying that Daphne and Cameron have a good relationship, because it is toxic as hell. But at least they have a definition of what their relationship is. Which, speaking of this toxic couple, we check in with them as we see them in their room and just playing their good old mind games, as Daphne brings up how Harper had concern about what they did the other night. And then they get into this whole joking thing about them sleeping with other people. And hey, to each their own, not judging them, because again, if they agreed about being married and having sex with other people and having kids by other people, that's their thing. But again, let me know in the comments how the tables have turned and which of these 2 couples will end up leaving together. Let's talk about it in the comments below. But let's check in with breakfast with Tanya and Portia, who Tanya tries to warn Portia about Jack and his relationship with his so-called uncle, but doesn't tell her the truth, which I'm very curious on why she didn't just tell her what she saw. But But in my mind, I guess it's just as Tanya, who we know she keeps a lot of things in, number one, but also she probably didn't want to make a big scene, potentially. Let me know why you all think that she didn't tell the truth to Portia about what she saw. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. But she also goes on to tell her that she reminds her a lot of herself when she was younger, and more particularly about being lost. And ultimately, she needs to get her shit together, which is a classic Tanya line. But I found it to be really a good scene, in my opinion, between these two, because just going back to, again, episode 1, how Tanya treated Portia, or even a couple episodes ago when Portia was pouring her heart out to her about her feelings about Albie, and we just saw how easily Tanya was just ignoring her, but she's actually having a sincere moment and trying to give her advice and try to tell her, you remind me a little bit of myself and don't make the same mistakes that I do. But it's a little bit too little too late, because she's kind of head over heels for Jack, but that's going to change a little bit later. But let me know how you all felt about that sincere moment between Tanya and Portia in the comments. But we transition over to the big day for the Grassos, who's going to be visiting the motherland. Meanwhile, Lucia and Mia confront Ethan about their missing payment, which just happens to be perfect timing because Harper comes down and she sees this, and you can only imagine what's going through her head, especially after having that conversation with her husband. You know, I can think of a word that might be going through her head right now, and I think that word might be revenge. And we'll talk about what Harper does or doesn't do a little bit in this episode. But I don't know what it is, man, but seeing Valentina inviting Isabella to celebrate her birthday just made me happy inside. But poof, things don't work out. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but I am so glad that Harper doesn't hide her emotions anymore, as she does confront Ethan about seeing him talking to Lucia and Mia. But unfortunately, this conversation is cut short because this is when the other couples come for their breakfast. But again, the whole thing about keeping your emotions bottled up and to come out in a very bad way, I think that's what we're seeing with Harper, and I can't wait to talk about that scene about Harper and Cameron when we get to that point in the review. But as we see, the day is set, and we see Portia and Jack hanging out, and we see that the uncle has given his nephew the credit card, and we also see the Grasso preparing for their day, and they have a new translator with them, and it's the one and only Lucia, as Dom has to pretend that he doesn't know her. I love Lucia. I told y'all weeks ago she's probably my favorite character, but let's be honest, she is definitely a home wrecker right now with a lot of these families. But another thing I want to bring up that I have in my notes here, a lot of you all mentioned it in the comments last week, that some of you all believe that Lucia is using Albie to get a ticket back to, or not back to America, but to go to America, to go to LA in particular. I have a theory about that we're going to be discussing a little bit later, but I think you all are definitely onto something, and we'll put a pin in that and circle back to that a little bit later in the review. But you got to love little small talk here when Bert's in the car with Lucia and he asks her what she does. She says hospitality, which I found to be hilarious. And things get a little bit complicated because they notice that Alexio is following them, and we'll talk about a scene with that Alexio character. Who he could be linked to. We'll talk about that here in a second. But back with our couples, Ethan wants Cameron to help him convince Harper he didn't cheat on her, as Harper and Cameron have some drinks together, as Ethan sees this, and it appears that they're both flirting with each other as he decides to go on a swim. I don't know why these characters don't just address things when they see it, but he goes on this swim. He comes back out of the swim to only return to a missing wife and a friend. And again, it goes back to the abduction thing. Was she taken, or was there some deception going on here? Because he comes out of the water, he checks his phone, and he has a text message that she went back to the room to get a hat. Let's break it down here. He arrives to the room only to find the door is locked, as Harper takes her sweet time and eventually letting him in, and the questions start pouring out. He wonders why she has to get a hat, but more importantly, why is that door, which I told y'all in week 1, I think that door is going to be very pivotal. Why is the door to Cameron and Daphne room, why is it slightly open, honey? Oh, I don't know. Who knows? $1 million question. Stop what you're doing right now. Put it in the live premiere chat. Put it in the chat when you're watching this in the replay in the comments. Do we think Cameron and Harper did a hookup? As we'll talk about the scene that we see Ethan replay in his head, do we think that something happened between them? Because I do think it's a 50-50 thing, and we'll talk about it later, but it is the whole side of it that's when he probably talked to her about, Ethan didn't do anything, blah, 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 and he just went about to get his book, and it just could have been no harm, no foul. But again, I remind you of the title of this episode, and one of the key words about the abduction is deception. Let me know did something happen between those two in the comment section. But as we move on, Ethan is slightly better after she tells him that Cameron confirmed everything, that Ethan didn't cheat on her, as Daphne returns from her massage from Timothée Chalamet with muscles. But something is 100% up, and we can see that Ethan knows this. Meanwhile, Portia questions Jack about his goals in life, and she's starting to realize that they are two completely different people with two completely different options, especially about the state of the world, as she's starting to realize that they are just not a good pair. Back to the mini car chase sequence with Alexio and Lucia, who goes with him, but not after we see Albie and obviously Bert, and even Dom steps up and says, no, don't let her go with him. I'm first off thinking, is she about to die right now? This is the last time I'm going to see her, which isn't the case. We see her a little bit later, but I appreciate the Grassos stepping up for Lucia. But then we're going to go back to that question that I talked about a little bit earlier, or that thing that you all mentioned in the comments weeks ago. Lucia using Albie for a ticket to go to America, and particularly to go to LA, because she mentioned in this season that she would love to go to LA, which, let's talk about it. If we are assuming that that is the case, is she really playing everyone right now? And not playing everyone, but playing the Grasso family in particular. And she's maybe the one setting all this up regarding the Alexio, abusive, controlling guy, wants money. And she's ultimately trying to get them to get on her side. And I don't know. This is where my mind goes. Again, it didn't happen this episode, but it might happen in the finale, going back to the title of this being taken by force, Abductions. Alexio works for the mob, which also means that maybe Lucia works with the mob, and that they might end up kidnapping Albie for ransom money. They might end up kidnapping Bert for ransom money, or Dom. That's where my mind's at. That we're looking at Lucia working with the mob, and they're going to end up taking one of the members from the Grasso family. That could be completely way off base, but let me know what you all think about that in the comment section. Back with the family reunion for the Grassos. Things don't play out well. It's not a happy ending from them, as they're ran off the land, and one of the women mentions something about money, and they should be ashamed of themselves. So I don't know if there's more to this plot. She did say you should be ashamed for coming here for the money. So I'm not sure what money she's referring to. Again, does this have anything to do with the mob? I have no idea. But let me know if you all think there's going to be more plots in this Grasso family reunion thing. Talk about it in the comments. Time for some nighttime action. Time to celebrate. Quentin sets up a date for Tanya with Nicolo, who's a part of the mafia, as she's also introduced to the rest of his friends. As we see Tanya getting a little pick up for the rest of the night, and they're about to have a good time. Which, speaking of a good time, it's time for Valentina's birth date with Isabella, who wants Rocco back because Salvatore is flirting with her, and she doesn't like that because she's spoken for, and it's revealed that she's Rocco's girlfriend. And even more devastating, they're engaged. I couldn't have been the only one that felt bad for Valentina at that point. And also that actress is so great in the role. Again, we don't get a ton of stuff for Valentina, but I talked about it a few reviews ago. The actress is given so much more than what she's given in the role, and I just felt bad for her. You just see the look on her face when she finds out she's engaged. Let me know if y'all feel bad for Valentina in the comments below, as Ethan has had enough, and he confronts Cameron about maybe being in the room with his wife. And Ethan brings up that the other day that we know that Cameron was naked in front of his wife, and you can just feel the tension in the room. You can feel, first off, the score kind of ratchets up, and I was nervous. I thought one of them was going to be punching one another in the face, but tensions are cooled down for now as both of their wives arrive. And we check back in with Bert, who's heartbroken at this point because he wasn't able to get the homecoming he was expecting from the women, as it appears he's found his new home in Mia, who's still playing on the keys. Back with Tanya, who's partying like it's 1999. We check back in with Lucia, who has arrived to Albie's room as we see them make it out under the moon. honeymoon. Meanwhile, Mia wants to give Valentina a birthday gift in their empty room. Shout out to the show. We get men and women hooking up. We got man on man. We got woman on woman. The show doesn't discriminate. Everyone's represented in this show. So shout out to Mike White making that happen. A sexual awakening for Valentina. So shout out to everyone being represented in this show. Let me know what you all thought about that scene. But as we get back into it, cut back to one of my favorite shots of this episode of Ethan, who's reimagining Cameron and Harper hooking up moments before he arrived. This is killing him from inside, but some might say this is karma, because the way that he's feeling right now is the exact same way that Harper felt when she thought that he was cheating on her. That whole episode when she just is like sitting on pins and needles, she's about to explode from the inside. Karma, because we're seeing Ethan go through the exact same emotions. So I thought that's just a funny way to how they played that and kind of tie it back to those emotions and them not having any honesty, not having any truth in their relationship. Big moment here as we go back to Tanya, who comes across some photographs in Quentin's room, and it's of a cowboy, and there's also a kid there. As we look at the picture a little bit closer, and it appears to be, as I mentioned in my review last week, that cowboy is the one and only Greg. So the question is, was that really Greg in the photo? Or, as we know, Tanya was sniffing the white lines in this episode. She was high off her ass. Did she imagine that was Greg, or do we actually think that was Greg in the photo? My opinion on the matter is, yes, I said it last week that I think that when Quentin was talking about his love story that he was referring to Greg, and I think it's pretty much 100% confirmed that that was Greg in the photo, which again ties it back to, is this a whole scheme going on? And we'll talk about the truth that Jack talks about in a little bit, but let me know in the comments, do you all think that was Greg in the photo? Let's talk about it. And also going back to just the parallels between Tanya and Portia, how she feels like she's the same person as her. We see this going on with Portia in this episode, and we saw it with Tanya with season 1 and now season 2. They don't have the best of luck of picking good people for them. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. As we wrap up the episode, back with Portia, who gets the truth revealed to her. Everything Jack is telling her is exactly what Cameron and Daphne were talking about weeks ago in regards to these people down here pretending that they're rich, but they're ultimately broke. He goes on to tell her how he came about finding Quentin, and that Quentin saved him from out of this hole, and he has to do some things in return. Back with Tanya, who's in that same room we caught Quentin and Jack with last week hooking up, being pleasured by a member of the mafia. What a way to setting up the finale for next week. So what did we learn this episode? Quentin is setting up Tanya and trying to get her money because his lover, the cowboy, Greg, set all this up. Hey, get her to hook up with someone. It's just an easier way for me to get a divorce because she cheated on me, right? She cheated on me. I didn't do anything wrong in this relationship, right? So is this a whole scheme? Again, he's going to get something out of it. I'm referring to Quentin. He's going to get some money and be able to afford his lifestyle he wants, and maybe he can get his cowboy back. And in return, Greg gets the divorce. He gets the money, and they all get to take money away from Tanya. Is that what's going on here? Let me know your thoughts on that. When it comes to the question, did we see in this episode, or didn't see, but it's alluded to, Ethan thinking that his wife cheated on him and seeing Harper and Cameron hooking up? The way that Harper was acting in this episode makes me think that she did, even if it was for 2 minutes, 60-second Minuteman situation, even if it was a second or 10 seconds, she cheated on his husband. Do we think that happened in this episode, or is it all in Ethan's mind? Again, karma catching up to him not telling his wife the truth about what happened when they had their guys' night out. Let me know what you all think about that. Like I said, I'm 50-50, but I'm kind of leaning towards 60-40. The more I think about it, 70-30. 80-20, 90% sure that we saw or alluded to in this episode. I think that they did hook up. Let me know your thoughts on that. And going to Lucia and everything going on, do you all think that Alexio, Nicolo, Mafia guys, that Lucia is setting up the Grasso family? She's trying to get money from them, and one of the Grasso members will be abducted for a ransom. Let me know if you all think that will happen next week. And again, the big question that, the show does a great job at, because it gives us so many other things to worry about. Someone dies. Well, multiple people die next week. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be something involving one of these relationships in regards to the married couple? Will Ethan explode and kill Cameron or kill his wife or kill both of them? Because we know right now, people that are safe are people that work at the hotel, because we know that Valentina and Rocco were the ones that saw the cops when they found the body. So I'm pretty sure that everyone that works for the hotel is fine. So we won't have an Armand thing from last season. But then we also know that Daphne's fine because she was the one that found one of the floating bodies. But we don't see Harper, we don't see Ethan, we don't see her husband Cameron. So is one of the couples besides Daphne in that water. And then, again, the Grassos families. Are we looking at the mafia angle? Did something go wrong with the ransom and they end up killing one of the Grassos and they throw him in the water? Or are we looking at Quentin and Greg and Tanya and Jack, knowing that he's a partier? Portia, who's in that water? Let me know your thoughts on that. And then one more thing before we wrap this thing up. There are 2 more images in the intro that you all can see on the screen now that we haven't seen yet. One of the burning house and one of a woman stabbing a man who's falling on his back. Will we see that play out next week? And speaking of next week, just a friendly reminder, 2 times next week. We're going live December 11th. We're going to do a live watch along. We're going to pregame about 10 to 15 minutes before the episode premieres. We're going to watch it together. And then 15 minutes or so after the episode premieres, we're going to have a live after show. So I can't wait. But before we get to next week, let's talk about this week's episode in the comments. Your thoughts, your theories, your predictions, all that stuff in the comments section. Thank you all for watching this review. If you're still here at this point, put in the comments hashtag Cameron and hooked up. Put it in the comments now. You all are awesome. Just a friendly reminder before you leave to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. As you can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out my reviews for this season. Check out my most recent review, and we'll see you all on the next breakdown.